So actually it was 2002, the middle part, because you got to go through that whole academic year. So growing up, I lived with my grandmother and my mother. We shared a house together. And, you know, families have conflicts and all that type of stuff, but you love each other. This particular December, you know, mom's in the kitchen, grandmother's in the kitchen, sisters in the kitchen, the women in there throwing down. My grandmother begins to tell the story of, you know, her siblings and her father, and she looks over at my mother and she says, y'all need to prepare to be able to do this. Everybody's looking at her like, what? Yeah, we know. Everybody, we got to learn how to cook. We got to get ready to, you know, we got to pass the torch on and everything like that. And she's like, no, y'all need to get ready to do this. My mom is like wondering, like, what's going on? This is kind of weird. I'm, you know, a young man. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're all good. We're all good. So while we're home on vacation, spring, winter break, enjoying the holidays, enjoying everything like that, right before I go back to college, well, my grandmother, she falls out of the bed, hits her head. In that, you're still thinking, everything gonna be good. Not a thought in the world that my life is about to be turned upside down. So, back on campus, I'm broke, by the way, catching the bus to go to the grocery store and everything like that. My best friend is with me, and it's about like 9 o'clock at night. So we're walking back from the grocery store, and my grandmother's in the hospital, but I'm still saying, she's good, she's good. And my phone rings. First cell phone I ever had, first phone rings. I look at the phone, and immediately my heart sunk, because I knew what was gonna happen. I answered the phone, and it was my best friend, my other best friend. He said, Ray, we gotta come get you. And I said, what? He just said, Ray, we gotta come get you. In that moment, I couldn't move. I stood still, and then all of a sudden, the emotion overtook me. It was like I was in shock, even though the words hadn't even been spoken yet. I was in shock. My best friend said, what's wrong, what's wrong? And I said, my grandmother's gone. She starts to cry. Out of the blue, I fainted. Couldn't handle it. Over the top. On the side of the road at Michigan State, coming back, groceries in my hand. And so, my body went into shock. I fainted. I actually don't even remember how I got from the side of the road back to my dorm, because everything was just like over the top for me at that moment. From that moment, everything just started to happen really, really fast. Family had to come up. I was done. I was laying in the bed. The whole time that my family is on their way up to come and get me, I'm just laying in the bed. Can't really talk to anybody, just crying and crying and crying. And so from that, I'm just thinking of how my life is about to change. Like, wow, life is really about to change. I never imagined life without my grandmother. Like, I've experienced death. Like, my father died, my great-grandfather died, my uncle died. I made it. I was like, okay, I'm good with those things. But your grandmother, my grandmother got up out of here. I said, Lord Jesus, I don't know how I'm gonna survive this one. And so we go through, have the funeral and things of that nature. So now I'm expected to just go back to school and get back to life. How do you get back to life when somebody that has been so integral in your life has been taken away from you? GPA went from 3.0, 1.9. How do you focus in physics and chemistry, and your brain is still trying to figure out what is happening? How do you begin to restart? Why are we experiencing this? Why did this happen? And so when you're going through grief, your body is going to have a series of responses, and a series of responses that you are not going to be able to control. And so, as you can see on the slide here, I experienced sleep interruptions for the first 6 months afterwards. Couldn't sleep, so I had to sleep when I could. having nightmares, bad dreams, replaying the phone calls over and over again. I also started to get sick a lot. My nervous system was shot. And it's cold at Michigan State. That is like farmland up there. The wind cuts through. Was getting sick a lot, was going in and out of the clinic trying to get antibiotics. Again, time lapse. I would lose track of time so frequently. I would be late to stuff. People would say like, hey, where you at? And I'm like, wait, what time is it? What's going on? My physics final, completely overslept for it. Had to run from one side of campus to the other side of campus because I just slept through it for no reason that I knew of, at that time. I was tired a lot. Of course you're tired because you're not sleeping. I wasn't sleeping at all. And so some of my emotional responses that I had during that time was, I really didn't have the regress behaviors, but I struggled with shock and disbelief, and I would go in and out of it, in and out of it. I knew my grandmother was gone, but I would have moments where I just couldn't fathom it. And so you'll hear when people talk about having auditory hallucinations and visual hallucinations during grief and loss. I did experience that because there would be times when I would go home, and because my grandmother was the person that would cook breakfast for us, she would be the person that, cooked dinner for us. There would be times where I would just be kind of like on autopilot. You wake up, you go shower and things of that nature. And I would walk past the kitchen and I would see my grandmother right there in the kitchen cooking. And it took me about almost like 6 months to a year before that stopped happening. There would be times where I would be sleeping and I would wake up because I would hear her voice from her room asking me to get her some water or something like that. That is a natural part of grief and loss. You can have that. Anger outbursts. I didn't really have the anger outbursts, but I did start to drink a lot, excessively, a couple times a week. And that would kind of begin to you do that to just numb out on the feelings, hoping that it would regain some sense of normalcy. And then again, the inattentiveness. How do you focus when a big part of you has, been taken away from you? You also have regrets. I had a lot of regrets because remember, we're a family. We're going to have arguments. We're going to say things to each other. We're going to have repressed feelings that we didn't really get to talk about with them. And I had all of those, but I never expected that we would never get a chance to resolve them. And so those things, those difficulties that we had, I ended up having to resolve them on my own because she was no longer there. Having to learn how to operate in self-forgiveness, things that I said, things that I did, things that I didn't do. Wondering at that time if I was a better person, would she still be here? So dealing with all of those, you will definitely experience that during grief. Fears and worries significantly increase because if you lose a person like that, the next person that I'm concerned about is what's going to happen with my mom. I'm overly protective of my mom. I got to make sure she's eating right. I got to make sure she's taking care of herself. I got to make sure she's getting to her doctor's appointments because I can't survive another one of those types of instances. My spiritual response, of course, I did experience anger with God. Questioning God, why did you let this happen at one of the most pivotal times in my life? I was a freshman in college. I was ready to start my life brand new. And then to have to deal with the loss of a huge parental figure in my life. And so that was my story of losing my grandmother and my experience from a male's perspective of grief and loss. There were so many things that I definitely experienced going through. The way that I talked about it today, of course, that is years later that I have this understanding of what I went through. When I was in that moment, I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was losing my mind, and probably a couple times I did. This only came from the understanding of having a master's degree, came from the understanding of going to counseling in my 30s, trying to figure a lot of these things out. But a lot of men don't get that experience. And a lot of men experience what I was experiencing, which is feeling like you're going insane, losing your mind, but also having no one to talk to about it. One of the most painful things of that experience that to a lot of people is going to seem small, but I recall it like it was yesterday when this happened. And that was my first day back to class, ISS 230. I will never forget it. I was struggling trying to get my grades back up, and I was asking my classmates, like, hey, what did I miss? Because I was out for like 2 weeks. What did I miss? Can I get the notes and stuff like that? This young lady said to me, she said, well, why were you out? I was like, well, I don't really want to talk about it, but my grandmother died. Her response to me was, you had to miss 2 weeks because of your grandmother? It took everything in my power not to do what y'all know what I wanted to do. Can't do that. But I will never forget that was that response. And so many people get responses like that just because it's not your mother, just because it's not your father, just because it's not somebody that is close to you. They think that you can't grieve that it can't be that intense, that it can't be that serious. And so we want to also be careful about how we talk to people when they're going through their grief. And so that's one instance of my grief story. Now, I've experienced a lot of other losses, but one stuck out to me even just about the same as when my grandmother passed away. And y'all are going to be shocked by when I say this. It was probably about 3-4 years ago. My dog ran away. My dog was my dog. That was my ace. So my dog, he was a Yorkie Terrier, about this small. He came to me, I didn't go out and buy him, but he came to me via my sister's household. My sister indicated that, they couldn't take care of this dog. My sister got married, my sister already had a child. Her husband had 2 children, and then they got pregnant and they had twins. So that put their household at 5 kids under the age of 10. And so they were like, we got to get rid of this dog. And I'm like, well, he's been in the family for about 3 years now. Let me keep him. And so taking care of this dog, everything is going well. And in my backyard, there's this fence, right? So my fence was broken and it laid a portion apart on the ground. So I said, let me get my fence fixed. But when I got it fixed, it left a space all the way across that, from the ground to the fence. Let my dog out to go use the bathroom. I went into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water, came back, dog gone. I looked around, I'm thinking my dog, he's in the backyard. Maybe he's over, behind the little compressor for the central air. Looked around, nothing. Went up and down the street calling his name, nothing. I think the mailman took my dog, to be honest with y'all. I really did, because he looked suspicious. But it probably did. But put flyers up and everything like that. And then I feel like what ended up happening, because I looked at my cameras, my neighbors have a tree that the branch hangs over. That branch was in my backyard. And so I believe that the branch fell, scared my dog. He ran at the fence and ran and kept going. So how that became a part of my grief story was because I lost my dog. Unexpectedly taken away from me. Most people would look at it as oh, it was just a dog, but this was my companion. And so some of the experiences that I had after that completely shocked me. It completely shocked me. For about 4 months, I was going up and down the street looking for my dog. I was knocking on neighbors' doors, offering rewards. There would be times where now it's been probably about a year has gone past. I would be driving down the street and I would just be looking, hoping that he would just be, running from under a car or something like that. And so when you're going through grief, this type of grief is called ambiguous loss. I don't know if the dog died. I don't know if something stole him. I had no closure. It was just ambiguous. And then again, you have people who make remarks about that type of loss, like, oh, it was just a dog, or, me and my friends, we play a lot and we say some pretty harsh stuff to each other. And one of my friends, and I didn't think I was gonna take it this hard, but he was like, we were laughing and joking, he was like, oh, you neglectful, you lost your dog. And I was like, oh, snap, that hurt. That almost took me up out of here. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that, and it let me know that there was some work that I needed to do about this ambiguous loss. And so I wanted to tell those two stories because that is how grief can be experienced from our perspective as men. So now, as we get further back into what we're talking about here, I am going to go into, no, I'm not going to go that far back. Let's see.
Wait to the end for questions.
Wait
to the end for questions.
You want to ask a question?
I kind of do.
Go for it.
Okay.
What's up?
So, I know you said something about your father passing, and you was like, were you young when that happened, and why was it more impactful for your grandmother than your father? It sounds like you was like,
Yeah, so with my father, what ended up happening there is that that was a great question. I expected his death. We didn't have the closest, we had a relationship, but it wasn't the closest relationship. I never lived with him. I knew who he was. I've had moments and I have some memories with him, but that didn't impact me the way that my grandmother did, was because we shared such a close bond together. And so your relationship, meaning like your actual title relationship, doesn't really have a bearing on how impactful a grief will occur in your life. It's more about the quality of time that you spent with that person. It's more about, the proximity of that person to you. So with my dad, even though he was an all right dude for what I know, but his proximity to me wasn't as close as it was with my grandmother. And almost not even as close as my dog. That's real, for real. And so when we talk about men's grief, we have nature versus nurture. When we're thinking about this, you have the way that the grief the way that the brain is developed. For men, it was originally thought that men and women experience grief the same, that there was no difference, even though it was debatable. But for a long time, in the academic world, there was really no difference. But they started to do research on men's brains, and they found a couple things here. And so, with the hippocampus, it is responsible for our memorization and our learning, and the amygdala is responsible for our experience of emotions, the recollection of the emotionally charged recollection of the emotionally charged experience. And so, with men's memory and emotion, it's kind of small here, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna just read it straight from here. With men compared to women, men tend to have less vivid and weaker memories of emotional events. They also access emotional memories a lot slower than women. So it doesn't mean that they don't experience it, don't have it. It means that they just access it a lot slower. Also, men compared to women will tend to have more intense recollections of these of emotionally charged men. All right, they will have more intense recollections of those memories, whereas men don't. And then you have the hemispheres of the brain, the right and the left. The research shows, this was done University of Stanford, in which it was showed that women's left and right hemisphere actually communicate with each other much more frequently than men. And so how that impacts us going forward as men is that, one, when we're in therapy, the recollection of certain memories may not be as strong. When they are having their thoughts, they may struggle to bring them back up. And so with that, that's gonna create some barriers. So now we're gonna go into the nurture part of that, which is men are socialized to detach from their emotions. So our brains are already going just a little bit, their communication is going just a little bit slower, but then to top that off we're socialized to detach from our emotions. And so for me, when I was going through my grief, being raised that way, all of these experiences were happening, didn't know what was happening. Why was I experiencing this? What was going on? And so when we're dealing with therapy, one of the first things that I have to do with my men is that I have to begin to work with them on learning an emotional vocabulary. I have to teach them how to reconnect with their body using things such as brain spotting, tapping, as well as internal family systems. These are all methods of counseling that help to reconnect men with their body and their emotions. Another reason why grief can be so difficult for men is because the brain recognizes grief as a problem to be solved. Our brain is a problem solver. And so grief is a problem that is not easily solved. And so when you're going through grief, your brain is trying to do a couple different things. It's trying to figure out what happened, why this loss occurred, how can we solve this loss, can this loss be undone, and so many other things. It's trying to really get you back to being stable, get you back to being ground zero. But so your brain is dealing with that. Then on top of that, your brain still is responsible for making sure your body is functioning correctly. So as your brain is trying to get the body to function correctly, you got to add that on top of your brain still has to remember what type of job you do. It's got to remember to take care of the kids. It's got to remember to do all of these other things. And remind you, the male's brain is operating a little bit less intense than our female counterparts. And so with it going through all of those different things, it's trying to figure out how to solve this loss, remembering how to keep the body functioning, as well as your day-to-day task. You then begin to experience things such as the time lapse, time blindness. You begin to develop more stress because the brain is trying to figure out, how do we resolve this? And it's not going to be resolved, which is why we have to go and get support to be able to resolve these things. Also too, so because the brain is trying to figure that out and it's resulting in stress, you're also receiving more cortisol and more adrenaline. And over a period of time, what can happen is that when your body is under the pressure of cortisol and adrenaline, you're then going to probably see things such as difficulty with sleeping, because you can't sleep when you got a bunch of adrenaline running through your body. And because of that, you can also experience the fatigue because you're not sleeping. You'll also begin to see things such as inflammation in the body. Inflammation in the body, putting pressure on kidneys, livers, and then you also if it goes for too long, like over a year, you can actually end up developing, a symptom called broken heart syndrome, where the grief and loss actually impacts the shape of your heart. It can cause the heart to be enlarged or decreased. So where somebody is going through grief and loss and they're telling you that their heart is physically hurting, it may really be physically hurting. And so, again, like I said, my immune system was weak. Oh, go ahead.
Can you talk about the difference between quote unquote regular grief and prolonged grief? Mm-hmm. And then the kind of cycle to broken heart?
Absolutely. So regular grief, there really is no time limit on it. But what you're talking about is something they call complicated grief. So if you are grieving and you're going through the natural phases of grief, if you find that a year later you're still having the same responses as to the first week when this happened, that's when it becomes prolonged. Usually going from that 12-month mark all the way to like 2 years, which in my office, I do have some guys who have been experiencing it that long, and they are experiencing some of these things. And so what was the second part of that?
And then if it goes even further to the broken heart.
Oh, yeah. So the broken heart disorder, what that is a response to the adrenaline, a response to the cortisol. The heart is being put up under a lot of stress. And so for some people, it begins to enlarge their heart, causing them to have irregular heartbeats. Some other people, it can cause their heart to shrink. And then that can cause them to have, like lowered blood flow throughout their body, which leads to other medical conditions as well.
2 questions.
When you talked about emotional vocabulary when dealing with men, what does that look like?
So I actually break out a full out emotional chart. It has a bunch of different emotions, and actually, nope, I didn't put it on here. Yeah, it's like a Ferris wheel, and so yes, that one there.
I'm about to say it's in our book, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yup. So I break that out, and what I do for a lot of my guys is we actually go through and I have them to pick out an emotion, and I say, tell me about a time that you experienced that. And if they struggle with it, then we break out a dictionary, we do some YouTube videos, look at how to actually, what this emotion actually is and how to actually experience it. For some people, I have them to watch Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, which is phenomenal. I recommend anybody that is working with people to watch that because it does a phenomenal job of breaking down different emotions that we experience. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Yep. Phenomenal. And so reconnecting them with that, like helping them to actually like pull out, okay, it's not anger, it's actually frustration. It's not anger, I'm actually feeling anxious, which a lot of times with the couples that I've been working with, that they come in because they'll say the anger is the problem. And I'll say, well, is it anger or are you actually anxious? And then we'll talk about what anxiety is. And they're like, actually, I'm not angry. I'm anxious. I'm on edge all the time. And that then allowed their partner to give them some grace because now they don't think that their partner is angry with them. They know that their partner is under some type of emotional distress and they're on edge because they're detecting some sort of threat. So that's how I began to work with them on developing the emotional vocabulary. And then again, we do like some brain spotting, we do some EFT, we do internal family systems, because just because you know the emotion don't mean it's gonna connect or register in your body. And so what those types of modalities do, that helps you to begin to connect the emotion back to the body. And so what that'll look like, I got like 60 seconds? Okay, perfect. So what that looks like, I will tell a person, one of my clients, I'll say, okay, so what is the emotion that you want to deal with on this week? They'll say, I want to deal with, let's say frustration. Okay, so we're dealing with frustration. They'll tell me about what has them frustrated, and I'll say, okay, I want you to take 10 seconds, and I want you to just try to tap in to that emotion. See if you can bring that emotion up to the forefront right now in this moment. Give you 10 seconds. And they'll close their eyes and they'll tap into that emotion. And then I'll say to them, I'll say, okay, where at did you feel that emotion become the most activated in your body? And once they begin to say, okay, I feel it in my chest, I feel it in my arms, or I feel it in my legs, I'll say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not present at all, 10 being the most intense that it could be, what number would you give it at this moment? And they'll put a number on it. And depending on the modality that I'll use, so if I say, let's say I'll use IFS, I'll say, okay, so there's a part of you that is feeling frustrated. I want you to ask that part of you for a little bit of separation. And when they get that separation, I'll say, ask that part of you that is frustrated, what does it believe its job is? What does it believe its purpose is in your life? And they'll take a second, they'll begin to like tune into their body and their heart, and they'll begin to come up with answers. Oh, this frustration is letting me know, it thinks that it's actually protecting me from X, Y, and Z. And so then we start processing it. We start processing it on a level that they've never processed frustration before. We can go even to the point where it starts bringing up childhood memories, things that one of the most interesting questions that I'll ask them is, how old does your frustration think that you are? And they'll usually say, oh, it thinks that I'm like 8 or 9. I need you to remind your frustration how old you actually are. And what is that like? And they're like, wow, it's like a weight off of my chest because my frustration has actually been utilizing the same skills as a 9-year-old when I'm actually 35. And that's why I've been having all of these outbursts, because I'm using the same frustrating skills as a 9-year-old. And so that's all in the work of connecting men back to their body with their emotions.
So I just recently lost my father like 2 months ago, and what I find amazing also is the things that people will say to you because of the expectations that they have out of you. So I've canceled a lot of stuff, and someone's like, well, I just knew you were going to cancel on me. And I'm like, just lost my father. Like,
Wow.
you know, so I completely, and the numbness is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I can't, it's still the disbelief and all that different stuff. So,
Absolutely. Your nervous system is still in shock. And so are you working with anybody, a therapist or anybody? I would recommend getting a therapist. I do offer therapy for men as well, but I also would want you to begin to look into some sort of self-care routines as well as relaxation techniques, because that can help with that nervous system dysregulation. But you can talk to me afterwards.
Real quick, broken heart theory.
Broken heart disorder or syndrome.
Yeah, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, I learned that while mammals can die from heartbreak. Yeah, like we can die from heartbreak too, as people, right?
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Tell you one of the ways is when you have broken heart syndrome, you know, whether in the science community there's a debate whether it is a thing or it's not. However, research do show that our body, a prolonged or complicated grief goes on for so long, your body, the organism gives up. So be a way of sending signals to important organs, like pancreatic cancer has been directly linked to broken heart syndrome because you can't get another pancreas. Right?
Yeah.
You can't get, there's no transplant for a transplant, so that's usually the common, the body's like, we're done, can't do this anymore. And a lot of times when I treat patients that are like in their late 70s and then they're still talking about, not that they wouldn't talk about their son they lost maybe 10 years ago, 25 years ago. Even one of my clients 30 years ago, his death was, a lot of things happened with his death. And I told her daughter, like, you kind of got to let your mom go a little bit. She's probably going to get like a liver cancer or a pancreatic cancer. Saying it, happening in 3 months, she died.
Absolutely.
She was just done. And she was alive because all her kids were like trying to force her to do things and be part of things. And I had to sit down with the family, and it was beautiful, but at the same time very sad. And I'm like, you guys have to let her go. And she's going to develop some sort of disease. Her body's going to give up. If y'all don't let her do it this way, and just like that, speaking in the truth, she died of liver cancer. Diagnosed, died 3 months.
Absolutely.
And that's broken heart.
Beautiful.
I say y'all ain't learned nothing today. Y'all know y'all not.
So I got one last thing that I want to leave you guys with. When it comes to grief, I can't remember where I got this from, but what complicates grief for a lot of people is that they believe that the way life was the best life was ever going to be. And so when you get to the point, and one of the things I help with people, I say, hey, if you don't have to date again. But if you believe, while that part of your life was good, if you believe that that's the best that your life could ever be, you'll always be stuck in your grief. You have to allow yourself to believe that life can be good again. I determine that. My grief doesn't determine that. Yes, sir. All right, we are dismissed.
Say that quote again.
Oh, with the last one that I just gave?